Welcome into a Tuesday edition of Connor's Takes. It's our first Connor's Takes in probably at least 4 or 5 months. So it's good to have this extra segment back in the rotation, in especially in the off season, in the right now in the pre edition of the dog days of summer, because we're still in the spring months. Not a lot of news circulating right now. We are post draft and we're about a week out from the schedule release. We'll end the show talking a little bit about the schedule release that comes out next Wednesday.
Oh,
And
yes,
then
finally.
today we'll dive into the talking about the Bills draft. We'll get a Connor Yinzer a Yinzer segment for Connor right after we talk Bills draft, and then we'll end the show with talking a little bit about Dalton Kincaid and the recent
Oh,
picture
boy.
that we've seen from Dalton Kincaid at OTAs. It's a little concerning. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll end predicting a little bit about the Bills' schedule. As we are about a week and a day away from the schedule release. So we'll get that going in just a little second. Today is just Connor Shakes. Tomorrow will be the regular scheduled programming where we will dive deeper into the Bills draft and deeper into the Bill signing, and we'll probably end that show talking a little bit about the schedule release again, because we're again another week away from that, and we're that means we're closer to the football, Connor. When we get the schedule release, that means we're another week closer.
At long last, if being completely honest.
Yeah. All right, let's dive right into our first topic of tonight, and the and this is maybe the second biggest topic on the table today is how good was the Bills 2025 draft class, and you have a unique perspective on this yourself. So I'll let you start off with this and talk a little bit about how you feel the Bills 2025 class went. Then I'll
I,
take over.
I. Okay, so listen, there are a lot of different perspectives going out around the league about how the Bills approach the draft. A lot of people, and I'm talking more people than you would think, actually say the Bills nailed the draft. I've had many people tell me in user circles that the Bills had a top five draft. I'm talking, you got teams like the Seahawks that had a really good draft. You have a team like, I hate to say it, the Patriots, who had an incredible draft. And then you have the Bills, who, aside from aside from the position everybody's complaining about, absolutely nailed it. They got cornerback depth to the point where, unless there is a literal emergency, you will never see Dane Jackson take a single snap at the position. You got pass rushers, and the only thing you didn't do, like I said, is wide receiver. But at the end of the day, they went out and they signed Elijah Moore. That was a great signing. They got a vet, quote
Mhm.
unquote, a vet. I mean, he's only, I think, 24. Compare that to literally every veteran wide receiver on the market right now. That's the youngest by a mile, because you still got guys out there like Keenan Allen, and
Mm.
trying to think. There's another one I know that everybody was clamoring about other than Keenan Allen in Bill circles, but Elijah Moore was the right choice. I was absolutely thrilled to see the signing. I actually manifested that signing, literally sitting there, was like, oh, well, here, I think it was credit to AJ on Twitter, because he was talking about what the Bills should do now with a list of the wide receiver free agents. And I just tweeted out, why not take a swing at Elijah Moore? A couple of days later, the Bills signed Elijah Moore. So I actually think that that was the best thing they could do. And I think out of everything that they did, they really just nailed that draft class. The only thing I want to know, and I want to know this from a few people, like I would love to ask Brandon Bean this question personally.
Mhm.
Why Maxwell Hairston over Trey Amos? That is all I want to know. Like, genuinely, I just want to know why Maxwell Hairston was the guy at 30.
Hmm.
And I loved the pick. Do not get me wrong. That was one of my favorite picks the Bills made in the entire draft was Maxwell Hairston at 30 because his stock had been climbing for a while, if you remember. And
Hmm.
when they made the pick, that was awesome. Apparently, they wanted Tyleik Williams though. I mean, do you remember hearing about that, Paul? The Bills
A
wanted
lot,
Tyleik
yeah.
Williams. Yeah, and then Detroit got right in front of him, which we probably the Steelers probably forced their hand too when they took Harmon because the Dolphins forced theirs when they took Kenneth Grant that high, which nobody thought they would. Which that's wild. Kenneth Grant
Right.
going that high was
Yeah,
not a
that was a
reach,
shock.
but that was the shock of round one for sure. Other than the obvious, which I will not talk one word about. I don't want to even think about that guy.
Hmm.
But no, the Bills had a great draft. I mean, if you go and look at their draft class, they nailed pretty much everything they needed to nail. They had pretty sure they used 10 picks, right? Because they started with 11, and I think they wound up drafting 10 guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think well, no, they had 10 picks and they kept all 10. They just used it in different fashion.
Hmm. Which you want to know what I actually thought was hilarious. You remember up leading to the draft how everybody was saying the Bills were going to take Landon Jackson in
Yeah.
round one? They did take Landon Jackson, as you recall.
Surprised he fell that far, but I expected him to fall a little bit. I don't think I expected him to fall, Landon Jackson, but I didn't expect him to fall to like the early portion of the third round. And that's really good for the Bills because that was the second part of their first trade with the Bears, and he was right there for them to take.
Hmm.
And Brandon Bean was and a lot of people were high on Landon Jackson. I personally was a Landon Jackson fan, but I wasn't he wasn't a first round guy for me. He was perfectly selected where he was anywhere from the second to third round. I would have been happy with a Landon Jackson pick. So I mean,
Hmm.
personally, I think uh the draft for the Bills went well.
Hmm.
There's a few spots where and I feel like there's going to be a new Bills Embedded that just released just now, and that I think will give great perspective of where the Bills might have been thinking about uh what they were thinking about during their draft. But where I kind of question the Bills draft is the pick is starting after the fourth round. So they're fifth rounders all the way up to their last pick of the draft. That's where I feel like it gets kind of clunky for the Bills. Jordan
Hmm.
Hancock would probably been who is a great, versatile player. I mean, you talk about versatility in the defense. He can go from being a regular corner to he can slide into being Taron Johnson's replacement or
No.
backup, if you want to say, at the nickel. But this guy, Hancock, can also go from nickel cornerback to playing safety if you need to. So
Hmm.
he's a perfect versatile piece that I like about Jordan Hancock. But then you go to their second fifth round pick in Jackson Hawes,
I had to talk myself into that one for a while when I
where
saw it.
where I'm like sitting right there and I'm thinking this is that is the perfect spot for a wide receiver. And again, this is before the finding out finding out Elijah Moore was going to be a Buffalo Bill. At that point, I'm sitting there. I'm like, that's the perfect spot because you still had Torrey Horton unavailable. You still had Jalen Royals available. And I believe you still had, I mean, it would have been a controversial pick, but if everything checked out, Isaiah Bond
Oh, I would have
was still
flipped.
available for the
There's a
Bills to
reason he's
take.
still undrafted,
Right.
Paul. There's
And
a reason
and
for that.
obviously he's undrafted and for obvious reasons, and
Mm-hmm.
so I would think he didn't check any of the boxes for the team, in which in that case that's perfect for the Bills not to take. But there was
Mm-hmm.
other players where I thought that was in great value of pick 173. And I get it. The Bills don't have Quentin Morris on their team anymore,
Nope.
and they need a run blocking tight end.
Yes, they do.
But I feel like, and right after Hawes went, I think the 49ers was the pick after the Bills, and they went tight end. So I guess Hawes was a player that the Bills were probably interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and they knew if the 49ers were going to take a tight end, a run blocking tight end, Hawes was going to be the first off the board. But
Oh yeah.
honestly, right there, I would have took wide receiver and taken your run blocking tight end later in the draft.
Fair.
Next pick was Dorian Strong. Then
Oh,
you
that pick
go,
was nice.
I think Dorian Strong will be great.
That pick was
I
great.
haven't watched too much of his film yet, but just from what I've around around Bill circles, that if he develops right, he could be he could practically be the Bills, another Christian Benford type pick for the Bills, and then you go Chase Lunt, and then you end with Prathers, right where I think
Oh,
Lunt
I loved
and
that Chase
Hahn,
Lunt pick.
where Lunt and Hawes were picked, I feel like both of those would have been prime spots for wide receivers. And again, you probably feel like if you're listening to this, I'm complaining about wide receivers. This entire thing. Was my mindset pre-draft, before the potential thinking about Elijah Moore. Just strictly on that, I think the Bills draft was a fluid, good Brandon Bean type draft. That's where I kind of place my mind in thinking about this. It is a good, fluid Bills type draft.
Mm-hmm.
You're building for now, but you're also building for the future. The future picks would be guys like Dorian Strong and Chase Lunt. Guys that are going to have to be fighting for roster spots.
Oh yeah. Being picked
And
in the
so I
sixth round will
think
do that.
those are perfect picks. And entering entering the draft, we said, and I said, the Bills have to hit on their first at least four picks. And
They
I
did.
think the Bills aced their first four picks.
They did. Oh, I mean, they
Normally
did.
we don't normally when we come out of Bills drafts, we're sitting here and we're talking about, is this the right pick for the Bills in the first round? And is this the right pick for the Bills in the second round? And I don't think, coming out of this draft, we're questioning any one of the first four picks.
Mm-mm.
And that's
Ju-
good. I think the only pick we're probably questioning is TJ Sanders, because of he's more of a run stopper instead of a pass rusher, and people would
Shoot, you
like a
kidding me?
pass rusher.
I
They
don't
would
know.
rather have a pass rusher than a run stopper. But honestly, I think TJ Sanders has the traits to become a really good run stopper and a really great pass rusher.
I mean, I'll tell you something that I thought of right as you said that he's more of a run stopper. I feel like if you look at the Bills' schedule, you're going to need a run stopper considering the running backs you're going to be facing throughout the year. You got Devon Achane twice. You got Brees Hall twice. You got Derrick Henry, Caleb Johnson,
Hmm.
Saquon Barkley. Oh my good lord. I mean, you have so many great running backs that you're going to be going against this season.
Right.
The Bills needed a run stopper and they
They
got
did.
one. And
Yeah.
realistically, I mean, I'd have to see more of the Dion Walker tape to see if he is
Hmm.
also more of a run stopper. But if you've got, let's say he is, and you have two defensive tackles that are excellent at stopping the run, you are literally going to eat on the field because if you stop
Right.
the run against a team, even like I'm not going to immediately go and say someone like Saquon Barkley or someone like Derrick Henry or Caleb Johnson or even Devon Achane, but you got to start somewhere. And
Hmm.
if you can hold those running backs down on every one of those teams, then you're going to have to force their quarterbacks to start throwing. On every one of those situations, you're probably going to win because that quarterback is not going to be able to keep up, especially when it comes to Tua. You're going to be, if he's got to throw because he can't get Achane going, they're done.
Hmm.
They're absolutely done. Then, think of the Ravens. It's the same thing. Get Lamar going in crunch time. You are not losing that game, just like how it happened last year in the playoffs. It was close, but when you stopped them when it counted, it was over.
So I have a few things here when I was doing some self scouting on Dean Walker. This guy is 6'6". He's 345. So right off the bat, that tells you that he's a massive dude. And the guys that we were talking about pre-draft is, guys that the Bills needed to get was these big dudes. They need to add more thickness to their defensive line. And they did that. And his best game came against Ole Miss. He had 5 tackles, 1 solo, 1 TFL, and he had a half a sack. And a guy that kind of fills the stat sheet is a guy that I feel like the Bills kind of need. They kind of need a guy that they can stop the run, they can get in and get some pressure, and they can sack the quarterback. And I think Dean Walker does a little bit of that. He did, I believe, have a he didn't see any action against Murray State this year with injury, and then he totaled 5 tackles against Vanderbilt in Florida. So he's getting some consistent production in the terms of getting beyond the offensive line and getting stops in the run game and tackling. But this Dean Walker is a guy where I'm sitting here. He's an athletic defensive tackle. He's 345, but he can move. So I feel like that's the product that you're going to get from Dean Walker is that he's big, he can move. The one thing I'm going to say that Dean Walker would need to work on, and you could say that's why he's a 4th round pick, is he's going to need to be a little bit more consistent against sturdier offensive linemen.
Hmm.
Uh, you look at this tape against Ole Miss, and you compare it against his tape against, a team like Georgia, who has a stout offensive line. The tape is completely different. Is where in the game, against Ole Miss, he was productive. He was all over the place. You kind of saw what Dean Walker could be. And then against Georgia, he's getting stuffed. And that's the side of Dean Walker we would not want on the field as often against top end offensive linemen. So I feel
Hmm.
like, him being a 4th round project player, that's kind of where you start taking your project players is on day 3 and beyond. So I feel like that's what you're going to get out of Dean Walker. And again, if you go throughout the draft, it's a good fluid draft. I'm not really mad at one particular pick. It's we're at the point of the off season. We're at the point of where the Bills are is where cherry picking has to be the part of the thing you have to do. And I feel like that's what kind of gets fans a little agitated when we talk, Bills football and you hear other media members, local or national talking about the Bills where this team is good in all aspects of the game, but there's just these small minute details that the Bills have to work out. And
Hmm.
I, for one, still feel like even though with the Elijah Moore signing, feel like the Bills could have drafted a receiver and signed Elijah Moore. I feel like that would have been just us from me to Bean and Bean to us. It would be saying we're starting to value this position more because if you look at the last, like, I don't know, let's say it's 3 drafts, Defense has been the talking point, and it has been because it's been one of the main reasons why the Bills haven't been able to advance past the Chiefs, and it's the defensive line and getting pressure. They invested top picks in defense, and they're in the defensive line and defense, and you're starting to see how it's going to go with extensions. These guys they're drafting and they're keeping them, and they're able to keep these guys on cheap contracts, and it's working well.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers are way more expensive to just keep going in every offseason and signing these guys. And I think just from a fan perspective, and thinking through the lens of these of media members, is we just want to see more investments in the product of the offensive side of the ball, because you could say the best wide receiver the Bills had maybe in the Josh Allen era was Stephon Diggs. And obviously he's not on this team anymore for obvious reasons. And we just want to start seeing more investment in that further down the road. That's it. It's draft retain on the offensive side of the ball.
As it
And I
should be.
don't feel like it's saying that's as in too much, but I feel like to go back to the draft, give this a grade and give it a solid B. Just taking taking 2 weeks removed from this draft class, I think it's a solid draft. It's a B. I'm not going to be biased towards my offensive takes. This is a solid draft. One, the Bills added a lot more depth to the secondary. That is a win for the Bills secondary. The
Mm-hmm.
Bills added a lot more to the defensive line. That is a win for the future and for now. So, but that being said, it's a solid draft throughout. It's a B. Any closing thoughts, ideas about this Bills draft, or another guy that you feel that would, it's, whether it's this year or next year, we'll start seeing a lot more of, and a name that you feel proud that the Bills got?
Well, I will tell you one thing. My favorite pick, at least in the later rounds of the draft, people were thinking I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It was Chase Lund. I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that you've got a guy now that if he is one of those gems, because let's be completely real, the draft is a crapshoot. Literally anybody that drafted, no matter where they were picked, can be a star with the right development, and if they've just got it. I mean, look at a lot of the picks that have been taken in the late rounds that have been absolute superstars. When the Steelers drafted Antonio Brown a long time ago, he was in a sixth round. Brock Purdy, of all guys, literally the last pick in the entire draft, and he's a starting quarterback. If these picks are going to hit and that Chase Lunt pick hits, you may have a franchise tackle for years. And that's one of the things that a quarterback of Josh Allen's caliber needs, is one of those generational tackles. And I like that the Bills decided to get some depth at tackle. That was my favorite pick in the late rounds for the Bills, period. I know people were like, but we needed a receiver, beat. No, you got something that's arguably even better, considering that as a skill group, the offensive line is probably the most important skill group
Mm-hmm.
because they protect the most important player on the team,
Right.
the quarterback. And getting that depth, if Chase Lunt pans out, will be big. Now, I also I do question the Caden Prather pick. I really do. I feel like you may have actually been able to take another tackle or another guard in that position, especially if it's just, seventh round pick. Those are
Mm-hmm.
guys that are going to fight to make the roster most of the time. I mean, I liked the pick. I'm happy they made the pick. I hope Caden Prather has a great career with the Bills, but I don't know. I feel like you could have actually completely avoided wide receiver. I know I'm giving you an aneurysm by saying this, Paul, but I
I
feel
mean,
like
I don't disagree. Honestly, I feel like Prathers or Prathers, however you say his last name, I think it's Prathers. I feel like that is just a, best player available
It
pick.
was.
It's your last pick of the draft, kind of make it count.
It was. It certainly
And
seems like it, and I liked it.
it feels he has the abilities to be a 7th round diamond, if you would say, but he's going to be fighting for the roster spot, and
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see how Prathers turns out and develops. He'll probably start the season, on the Bills practice squad and see if he can work his way up into getting some game time. I mean, maybe he's a deep vertical threat, something that the Bills need, but we'll see if he makes the roster. And I kind of question, that just a little bit. But again, if me questioning a wide receiver, feels like I'm contradicting my earlier statements. Well, you're taking a 7th round wide receiver that you're hoping makes the roster and makes an impact. But
That's just it. You
right,
take
so
a
we're gonna
guy
go
in
into our
those you take a guy in those late rounds, that's all you wanna see is if can they make the roster.
yeah.
It's not like a first, second, third, or fourth round pick that you're
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, you are starting and you are gonna like it, and if you are bad, we're gonna suffer because of it."
Right.
And that's mostly, round 1 guys. Round 2, maybe. 3, 4, sure, maybe if it's a real bad need, but no, once you
Mhm.
get down below that, good luck. You're basically backup
Yeah.
territory unless you are like really good in training camp.
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel like the Bills were able to approach the end of their draft was they just got guys at positions they already were strong at, tackle, cornerback. At least now they're strong at quarterback after the Maxwell Hairston pick in round 1, following that up with Dorian Strong. I mean, very stout room,
Mhm.
especially with
It's a
Christian Bedford
loaded room.
already locking down CB1.
All right, so let's head into our next topic here. It's your topic to take. So why if you go through the Steelers draft, they didn't take a wide receiver. A guy that's
We
currently
didn't need one.
looking for a new contract is George Pickens. You've been on the trade George Pickens train for a long time,
Hmm.
but they didn't take one for his replacement. Do you think that is hinting toward a possible George Pickens signing?
Turns out he actually never requested a trade at all.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody was saying George Pickens requested a trade. Actually, he did not. He came close to it, but he did not. And that's why you didn't see the Steelers take a wide receiver in the draft. Out of all their picks, they stuck to their guns. Everybody was thinking they were crazy for not drafting you know who in the first round. Which I was so thankful they didn't. Derek Harmon is going to be is going to be an anchor on the defensive line, especially once Cam Hayward retires. Cam Hayward is getting up there in age. He's not going to
Right.
be there for a long time. I mean, the man was there for both Super Bowl 43 and the Super Bowl they lost to the Packers. Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl, which, by the
Mhm.
way, we're all sick of waiting for him in Steeler Nation. We get it over with or go away. That's all they're saying is just get it over with and sign or go away and let us roll out with Mason Rudolph or try to trade for Kirk Cousins. That's literally the talk right now. And it's crazy. But no, Pickens is not going to get traded. And as a matter of fact, if you want to know why I really don't think he's going to get traded, round 6, pick 185, Will Howard. He is literally going to be the future, and they know it. So they want to make sure he has everything in his power to succeed. That's also why
Mhm.
they took Caleb Johnson at round 3. I think they knew all along they were going to be able to get Will Howard, especially once you know who was taken by the Browns.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
not talking about Dylan Gabriel.
Mhm.
Once he was gone, that point, the Steelers could just wait as long as they wanted to take Will Howard. Because if they didn't, nobody else was going to, I don't think, because
Mhm.
somebody
Right.
was, well, the Dolphins might have, because the Dolphins
They
took
might
Quinn
have, yeah.
Ewers, and they might have if he was still there, but the fact that he fell that far is wild. People were saying Will Howard is a third round pick. and the Steelers managed to get him in the 6th round. That's why Pickens didn't get traded. I also think maybe they're going to get a little closer in talks. Maybe Pickens wants to play with Aaron Rodgers for a season before Will Howard takes the field. I don't know. Nobody knows about Aaron Rodgers. We are only thinking about Will Howard, and his development will be crucial. I know I told you this, Paul. I'm pretty sure I told
Mhm.
you. I might have told Ben. I told Jenna. I told a few. The fact that he's got to deal with Arthur Smith as his offensive coordinator is mind-numbingly bad. I would rather have Ken Dorsey as offensive coordinator than Arthur Smith, and I am not kidding. I would gladly take Ken Dorsey's botched play calling over Arthur Smith's usage of tight end 4 on a game-winning drive. Like, are we for real right now? It's wild. I have always said it. I said the Steelers, as soon as Ben retired, they should have just given him an offer to be the Steelers offensive coordinator, because
Mhm.
most of the time when the Steelers had offensive drives that were sustained and they were moving and they ended in touchdowns later
Mhm.
in games, it's because Ben said, "I'm calling the plays myself." And he did. Like, Ben could have been the team's offensive coordinator, and it would be fitting for a legend in a city to that played quarterback to stay in the city and actually coach the
Mhm.
team. Now I'm just seeing Josh Allen doing that in like 15 years. When he eventually retires from the NFL, he just goes and becomes the Bills offensive coordinator and stays that way for a long time after that, because he just, all that football knowledge he knows. But at the end of the day, I definitely don't see the Steelers trading George Pickens at this point. They want to make sure whoever the quarterback is going to have as stout a receiver room as possible, because you got to think, with DK Metcalf, George Pickens, now you've added Robert Woods. You've still got Roman Wilson in development, who, if you
Mhm.
remember last year, a lot of Bills fans were really high on Roman Wilson. You remember that,
Right.
right?
I do,
Well,
yeah.
and then the Steelers got him. And then you pair that with Caleb Johnson, and you got to watch that Iowa tape. That is an electric running back that was taken in
Yeah.
round 3. He is
Uh-huh.
amazing. And you got Pat Fryermuth and then Darnell Washington at tight end. I mean, you're going to load whoever the quarterback is. You have loaded him up with firepower. Now, I'm not saying that, out of all the wide receiver rooms in the league, that the Steelers have a top 5 one. I would not say top 5. I would definitely say top 10. Like, they've got an elite room. But as far as anything higher than that, I couldn't tell you right now. I literally couldn't say it, because it's just not that's not true. And
Mhm.
so much of this team is a question at quarterback, and not trading Pickens is really why. It's telling. They want to give whoever quarterback is a chance to succeed, because when they drafted full defense early on, aside from the one obvious one, Caleb Johnson, that's how you kind of knew that they had it in mind, that they were trying to build, not only depth, but they were trying to win now. Derek Harmon was obvious. They wanted Kenneth Grant. I'm sure they did, but he was already gone. Thank you, Miami. He is going to be useless. But anyway, Jack Sawyer in round 4, Yaya Black in round 5. I mean, they loaded up. Carson Bruner was the only pick that was like actual Steelers, because that's
Mhm.
because his father played for the Steelers. That's the one pick that you knew, yep, they were taking him if he was there, because that was family. That's a Steeler way. That is literally the Steeler way. That's why you saw Joey Porter Jr. get drafted by the Steelers, because that's literally the son of Joey Porter, who
Mhm.
played with the Steelers. So out of all those picks, they're loaded to succeed, and they are actually they're doing everything they can to win. And I think that's part of why Pickens is still here, and why it came out that, now he never actually requested a trade. He flirted with the idea, but eventually he
Mhm.
just said, "No, we're not going to do this. I don't want to be. I don't want to leave. Maybe we'll work." So it's actually kind of funny because it feels like another version of James Cook, except you know how all the James Cook talk died down. James
Yeah.
Cook never put in a trade request. They
Mhm.
just tabled negotiations and said, "We'll work
Right.
on it later." That's what I
Right.
feel the same thing happened with Pickens. They just said, "All right, we're going to table the talks and we'll work on it later. Right now, we want to win, and they're loaded to win."
All right. So yeah, the Steelers are definitely in a position where they're trying to win. They're trying to win now. Like obviously, you get Mike Tomlin in that. Try to extend his winning season record. But let's go back to the Bills and
Mhm.
Dalton Kincaid. There was an interesting photo released today, circulated through a guy named Thydoc
Oh, I love
on
Ty Doc.
Twitter. He found the picture. Here it is. So this is an interesting photo. You see Dalton Kincaid on both of his knees has, it looks like his far knee it looks like a compression sleeve, and his near knee has a full on almost brace, you could say. But
Mhm.
the biggest I feel like concern here is how small Dalton Kincaid is. And you go back to end of season or early part of the off season interviews with Bean and McDermott. Both of them asked Dalton Kincaid to add weight, and that doesn't seem like it has happened so far through the first, let's say, 2-ish months of the season. So we're going to ask this question: what level of concern should Bills fans have on the weapons of Josh Allen after you see this Dalton Kincaid photo?
I tell you what, it looks like he lost weight. He didn't gain weight, he lost it. That's what it looks like. I don't know if he really did or didn't, but he looks slimmer than he did
Mhm.
when last season was going on and he was tearing up defenses left, right, and center. He looks slim. It's wild, but you only hope that whatever didn't they say Kincaid had surgery?
He
Like,
did.
okay. So that would explain why he probably did get a lot slimmer because you're obviously not going to eat that much leading up to surgery and you're not really going to your eating habits are going to change. So maybe he just lost all that weight because of the surgery. I'd still feel comfortable. I mean, it's not like Kincaid had a very it's not like he literally tore his ACL.
Mhm.
If I remember, what was the injury again? It wasn't really an injury. He just
It
had
was
something
a
looked
knee
at.
sprain, but he needed surgery in order to kind of repair
Mhm.
it. So they probably was more like a knee cleanup type surgery type
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah, it was a precautionary thing from what it sounds like. Like he had to have it to ensure that the knee would heal properly. So I wouldn't be that concerned. I feel like if they repaired it and Kincaid, is healthy again, like completely healthy, and that knee isn't an issue, he'll be
Mhm.
fine. He'll be back to where he was as one of the better tight ends in all of football because I just don't think Kincaid's going to fall off like some people are scared he would. Like a complete drop to, I'm talking, I don't want to say, wait, I could say, no, I don't want to say that I don't want to say that far, but I think he'll be, I don't think he'll drop into the level of bad tight end where you'd have to
Mhm.
basically start Knox all over again and then rely
Right.
on your late round pick in Jackson Hawes to actually do something, which they won't. He's a run blocking tight end, and it's a lot more fitting that they don't
Mhm.
rely on him to do anything because you can't. You know, he's a run blocking tight end. It's not like you
Yeah.
got a guy like Darnell Washington. That's a big man. I mean, Pat Fryermuth is even bigger than Dalton Kincaid now, and Pat's pretty big for a tight end.
Yeah.
now Kincaid is looking slim, and that knee brace is just interesting. Hopefully, he's okay. Like, I hope he
Mhm.
is. I think he'll be fine. I definitely don't think you're gonna see it where it's gonna be so bad that they have to start Knox over him, but
You're right.
I hope he's gonna get back to what he was because I
He
loved the pick when they made it. I
yeah, I,
loved his
yeah.
I just loved it, and I loved his talent. I still do. Like, he is a good tight end, and I definitely think that as the season goes on, you'll have to really watch his knee. But
Yeah. The thing here with Dalton Kincaid is there going to be enough time between now and the start of camp where you could say he can possibly add, let's say, I don't know, 10, 15 pounds. I think that's doable. I think 10, 15 pounds within the next 2 months before training camp is doable, but is that enough to where the Bills feel comfortable in him starting to get the reins of, of pass blocking, run blocking? Do they feel comfortable in that with him? Or does he's or is he going to be a guy where, he's just going to be on the play on the field for passing
oh,
downs, and he has to use his body to get open. That's the tight end position. You have to use your body to get open. And if you're not big enough and you're not strong enough to do that, you're going to get knee injuries, you're going to get ankle injuries, and you're just going to get stuck at the line.
mhm,
And Dalton Kincaid, if you go through his college tape and his early rookie season tape, he was able to get off the line really well. He was able to get off blockers really well at the line. And in year two, that didn't show as much. Did he maybe lose weight between year one and year two? Could that been an issue? Yes. Do the Bills need him to get bigger? That's an also yes. So I think it's a little concern there where you take a tight end of his caliber in the middle of the first round 2 years ago and say he still needs to get better in this area, which is to
oh,
gain some weight, get some bigger, so he can beat guys off the line and create his own separation, in which he was able to do so really well in his rookie season. And
mhm.
now we're 2 seasons later, he's looking slimmer than what he did when he's first drafted. I
And a
mean,
lot of those players go through sophomore slumps. I mean, I
sure.
think I think he's gonna bounce back in a big
Uh-huh.
way. I think a lot of people are hoping that he does. Well, most are, but I think he will. I'm more of a Dalton Kincaid believer than most. I
Same.
really think he's gonna be a good, probably better than Pat Fryermuth level tight end. Oh, and I actually do want to tell you this, Paul. I don't know if you saw this tweet, but I don't even know if you've seen the new embedded episode. But
Have not
Brandon
yet.
Bean.
That's exactly what I'm doing right after this.
Ah, nice. Well, I'll tell you one thing, and only one. Brandon Bean had apparently said on the episode that if Maxwell Hairston was not at pick 30, that the potential pick would have probably might have been TJ Sanders at 30. They liked him that much. If Hairston was not there at 30, they may have taken TJ Sanders instead. He would have been
That's reach.
he would have been in the conversation at 30. It was a great pick. See, I loved the TJ Sanders pick solely.
That's an interesting thing to talk about tomorrow, because I
I
don't think
liked
I
him.
would have took TJ Sanders that early.
I would not
But
have taken
TJ
him at round
Sanders where
one
he
either.
was taken was a great pick.
Exactly. Same thing with Landon Jackson. I liked both of those picks for the value at where they were
Yeah.
picked. I
All
liked
right,
the
final
player.
topic before we get out of here
Oh yeah,
is going to be
this is a
on the
good one.
Bills draft.
Oh,
Did
this is
not
a good
mean to
one.
cut you off there, Connor.
No, this is a good one. I don't blame you. This is a good one.
The Bills have a loaded schedule this year. How many primetime games do you think the Bills will end up getting this year as an
Yes.
early count?
Yes. And I can hopefully ease your minds a little bit. I am hearing from my people elsewhere in the Steel City that that the opponent that they'll be taking on in Ireland will be out of the NFC North. So if anyone's afraid that the Bills are going to be the ones playing overseas in Ireland, no, you won't.
That has
Highly,
that
highly
has
unlikely.
if it's going to be out of the north, that has feels like it has like Steelers Packers or Steelers Vikings written a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit.
no, it is. It has the Packers written all over it. People are thinking that it's going to probably be the Packers because we got to go through the entire AFC North or NFC North. So I will assume right now that it'll be the Packers playing the Steelers in Ireland. So Bills Mafia doesn't have to stress about thinking about going overseas to play against the Steelers in Ireland. Because whoever
Mhm.
goes there to play the Steelers in Ireland is in for a rough time, considering just how much more motivated Art the Second is going to be and want to see them win in his country.
Right.
So at the end of the day, though, considering the Bills' opponent list, there are so many opportunities for prime time games. Let's
Mhm.
be real, because you've got obviously the Ravens at home, you've got the Bengals at home, you've got the Chiefs, you've got the Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions
Yeah.
at home. On the road, you're going to Pittsburgh, you're going to Houston, you're going to Miami, obviously. The other games, I really don't think they'd be much of primetime events.
Yeah.
Maybe a
But
close, unless the Patriots are a wild card contender at the end of the season, and you're on the road against them in New England, or you're playing them at home. One of those might be a primetime game if the circumstances are right. But as for how many others are going to possibly be primetime, I don't see how you don't make Bills Chiefs another primetime game. I
that's
don't see how you make
I
Bills.
feel like that's
Uh,
CBS's game for the foreseeable future.
it would have
I
to be.
feel like that's a
It would have to be.
425 almost every single year, unless the NFL says, "Hey, CBS, we're not giving it to you this year because you had it for 3 consecutive seasons."
Hmm.
Before that, it was before 13 seconds, you go back at Bills Chiefs was a Thursday night on Fox,
Hmm.
and then the next year, I think CBS had it, not CBS, NBC had it. That was the rainstorm game at
Oh
halftime.
Lord.
Halftime was delayed a little bit, and then the game didn't end till like midnight, whatever.
Hmm.
Then the next year, then that I believe that was the season of 13 seconds, and then CBS been having the Bills Chiefs practically since that moment. Right now, going through the Bills schedule, the Bills get the NFC North. I
Oh
don't think
boy.
sorry, they don't get the North, sorry, they
You
get
get
the
the
NFC
NFC
South.
South.
They
Yeah.
get the NFC South. I don't think they're going to get any of those games in prime time.
Are
Those
you
are
sure about that?
other than the Bucks, I
That's
don't
the only
see
one you may get.
that's the only one I could see that could be a 1 o'clock slated, but it could be a 425 or 825 flex depending
Actually,
where it's slotted.
you know what?
But, if
Hold
you
on,
go back to
Paul.
Bills Bucks
Hold on.
before,
Hold on.
Bills
Hold on.
Bucks was a Thursday night game a few years ago.
Paul. Hold on. I thought of this.
Mhm.
You might get a Thursday night game out of one of those two NFC South bottom feeders between the Saints
Mm,
and the Panthers, because that'll be one of those games that they put on Thursday night just so they can see the absolute wallop the Bills put on whoever it is, whether it's the Saints, whether it's the Panthers, maybe even the Falcons or even the Browns. That would be glorious
but
Thursday
I
night
feel
football,
like it's
especially the
going to
Browns.
be a
Put
Thursday night game for the Bills.
put them against the Browns.
No.
Stop their guts out on Thursday night football.
I have 2
That'll make me so
potential
happy.
options for the Bills on Thursday night. At New England, I feel like would be Bills at New England would be a mid-season battle between Allen and May. I think that would be a Thursday night game Amazon would want. You get
Oh
the
yeah.
Josh Allen and could be the up and coming next star quarterback in Drake May. I feel like what the Patriots have done signals that they're going to get some Thursday night attention this year. Why not? Bills going on the road to New England in the middle of the season. But another game that I feel like Thursday night football would be interested in, let's say maybe like week 16 or like maybe week 15, you're getting closer to the end of the season where games start to matter. Bills going on the road to Pittsburgh. I mean, that's normally uh primetime season for these networks. And I think, where the Steelers might be in that point of the season might indicate, a big primetime game for Thursday night football. And, you wherever the Bills might be, they might be in a divisional battle. They might already have the division clinched and they're trying to get the 1 seed as they did last year. And then, you get Pittsburgh trying to fight for their most likely their wild card lives as they normally do, as they
The
stay
9 and
right
8
around
Super Bowl.
500 every year.
The 9 and 8
So
Super
I
Bowl. You
feel
got that
like
right.
that's a perfect Thursday night, late season Thursday night game. Right now, I have the
Maybe.
Bills slated. I think this might be the least amount of primetime games. So I feel like it's
Least,
on
huh?
light. I've got 3 right now primetime games and 2 425 games. The
All
425
right.
would be Cincinnati and Kansas City. I would feel like the one that would get taken out of the 425 slate and thrown into prime time would be that Cincinnati game, because I don't feel like the NFL is going to give up on uh the 425 week, I don't know, anywhere from week 8 to week 11 Bills Chiefs slate game in whatever it's normally, sometimes it's November,
Mm-hmm.
late October, right around that range would
Mm-hmm.
be probably Bills Chiefs on CBS 425.
You got to make that
We,
game a late game because there's no way you'd want to make that game one without any playoff implications early on in the year. Like, no
they
way.
normally
Same with
keep
the
it right
Eagles.
around like the week. I think the Bills, let me see when Bills Chiefs was this past season. It was in
Kind of
November. It
early,
was week
actually.
11. It was week 11, so right in
Yeah.
the middle of the season. I think the year prior was right around then. I think that was like week 7. So it's most likely going to be in the range of week 8 to like week 12. I think the Bills Chiefs will land. The Bills' schedule is interesting this year. Not a
Mm.
lot of games that pop out as primetime games, but then there's a lot of those Bills, Ravens, Bills, Eagles, Bills, Chiefs, Cincinnati that do pop out
Oh, yeah.
as primetime games. So if you throw out a number right now, how many do you give?
3.
3? That's the number I give.
And I'm throwing it out as a guess. I actually think the Bills could have way more than 3.
Yeah, they probably
Way
end
more
up
than
like
3.
5, probably.
I'm lowballing it on purpose because I think there's 3 games that you absolutely do not miss the chance to make prime time.
Mhm.
Chiefs, Eagles, Ravens. That's it. Every one of the others, potentially. Some of them, perhaps. Others, absolutely not, because the Bills are going to fold whoever it is, like the Saints,
Alright.
the Browns, probably one of the Jets games. Just don't fold Justin Fields enough to where he has to leave the field. The more he plays, the better the Steelers' compensation pick is for him at the end of the year. I'm just saying. He
Yeah.
plays, I think, 75% of the snaps. Pittsburgh gets a third round compensation pick for him, and they're already getting one for Russell Wilson. They're going to have 3 third rounders next year, by the way. 3.
Trade capital right there.
Yeah, we're going to trade all the
With
way up to number 1 overall if we need another quarterback. Arch Manning is a
Drew
Steeler.
Aller.
The draft is in Pittsburgh next year, by the way. I'm
It
just
is, yeah.
telling you right now how that's going to
That is
happen
true.
because that's going to be the craziest crowd of Yidzers you'll have seen since 2010, and that crowd
Alright.
went home disappointed. This one will not.
Alright,
But
that concludes this edition of Connor's Takes. Tune in for the main programming tomorrow. Ben will be here with us for the Undercovers podcast. We'll be, again, deep diving the Bills picks, Elijah Moore, and probably a little bit of other things sprinkled in between of NFL news and Bills schedule related stuff. until tomorrow, follow me and Connor both on our Twitter handles, giving out the best football content out there. And until then, until tomorrow, go Bills.
Go Bills.